The dust has settled and we are roaring on in to a new ban list. So what's the top 10? A big 30% of you that have not smashed the ever-living crap out of that subscribe button, smash it so you guys don't miss out on more awesome content. We're going to start off with Vanquishful down here at number 10. Now, the reason why I want to put Vanquishful down here is a lot of people aren't going to be anticipating this. People are going to look at this deck and they're going to go, oh my gosh, this is so terrible. And then they're going to lose to a TC boot that's about to be flipped on them, / a skill drain. Control decks will always catch people off guard. And I think that that's a little bit more of an interesting little turning point here, especially, since Yu-Gi-Oh! Players don't know how to play against this deck yet. Do not underestimate the surprise factor. Obviously, the price point is very, very up there, and people are just going to look at people that are playing this deck and they're going to go, wow, you just spent money for really no purpose, which is fine. If you're entering into a duel with that level of mentality, that means that, well, congratulations, our dear friend probably already won the game on you. So don't underestimate Floodgate Generation decks. It is a little bit degenerate, in the level of things, but I think that that's something that you really got to consider here. Next up is Superheavy Samurai. Now, I'm going to just encompass this as super heavy variants, because obviously you can splash in a super heavy package into certain decks, and you can make different builds actually work. This is actually like more of a wild card slot. I'm not actually sure how this is going to work out. I do think that a lot of people are going to discount the deck very heavily, and I've seen a lot of cool combo lines actually still working after Scarecrow actually was gone. So maybe this package will drop itself in as a sub package for possibly another deck. We will have to wait and see, at least in terms of the developments for this. But I think that that's something very interesting, is the people that enjoyed the combo lines for this are not giving up on the deck. I mean, we just saw an Adamantipator version of this deck actually work. So anything is quite possible at this point. Next up is going to be Runick variants. So, I mean, kind of keep in mind, we do have Sprite later on in the list here, but I mean, in terms of Runick variations, you have Plunder Patrol, which was seeing a pretty decent amount of play. Obviously, you have the Sprite variants, which, I mean, do not underestimate Sprite, Evil Twin, good stuff, but we'll talk a little bit more about, Sprite's inclusion into this. Pure Runick is not something you're going to want to estimate either, but now that, we've lost a fountain, the deck is now more so than ever just a very big splash engine that you'll be able to do. So if your deck is one of those variants that can, take advantage of the degeneracy that we've been seeing out here, if you're very familiar with what we're going to call the amazingness of those variants, I would definitely say that Runick, once again, like Superheavy Samurai, is going to be a very strong competitor out here. Like, there should be no question about something Runick doing well. Now, there's a question of Swordsoul here. I feel like Swordsoul's a little bit high on this list for where other things should be, but Swordsoul is the gold standard for a lot of people. The deck actually really, really, really does some pretty cool things. I'm really excited to see, if Old Reliable can actually kind of wake back up here and do its thing. Also, to be honest with you, you have Ringworm shenanigans. You have whatever flavor of, little extensions that you want to add into the deck as well. Thank you, Tenyes, for actually making that viable now. I'll have to wait and see, at least as more time develops here, if this is going to stick around. But Swordsoul, it's in such a unique place right now. But maybe I might bump it down maybe to 9/10. At this point, I might push Vanquishful to like the honorable mentions, but this was very early thoughts. Next up is Sky Striker, the king of bricking next to Kashtira this format. So Sky Striker obviously thrust into engage. Actually, you feel like an absolute champ when you actually hit that, that drive. You're like, oh boy, all the advantage is coming. Yay, like, this is amazing. I love the snowball effect here. Like, my opponent's not going to know what to do. And then you're just like, yay. Like, what do at this stage? you have to play a lot of cards to counter a lot of matchups right now. It's not like you're not a 5-year-old deck for a reason at this stage. You do have a lot of good cards, but the deck's age does show. And I do think that Sky Striker is something you need to be aware of. I do foresee this deck probably continuing to take some top spots at events. Is it going to be an absolute dominator? No. Not by any stretch of the imagination. That's definitely something reserved for Kashtira. Next up is Despia. Oh my gosh, Robbie put Despia really high on the list, guys. It's a sign. No, it's, you lost Expulsion. You lost your free auto win button. You have to work for every one of these wins now. And looking at how Despia is kind of struggling out here, its age is showing more than Sky Striker at this point. But once again, your people will not play around Mirror Jade. It amazes me. You are going to have to deal with Ash Blossom and Joy of Spring more so now than ever. Crossout Destiny is probably going to be your friend for this format. I think if you can kind of overcome a lot of those weaknesses, that I think this deck can definitely step back into the light and continue to do its thing, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be a top competitor. All right, it's definitely going to be something that you're going to have to be aware of and actually try to figure out the best way, your best ratios, and do you main deck the Gimmick Puppet or not? That's your decision tree. Next up is Labrynth. This deck has been all hype. I mean, everything has just been hype for IKEA. The Labrynth group has swore that they're the best deck in the entire format. I don't think that's the case, actually. I think that Labrynth is a very strong competitor. That's why I put it relatively high on the list here, but kind of looking at how things are going right now, I think that, yeah, you have hand-ripping options, which makes this deck very, very good. All right, the hand-ripping options are fantastic, but Labrynth right now, I don't know, it's in a unique position. Yeah, back row removal is kind of out of the format to a degree, but from what I've seen, just the pure amount of random decks going around the format right now, especially how diverse this deck is actually kind of having a hard time trying to cover all its bases. It might not be able to patch one matchup, and that matchup just runs into it and blows it up. So that's a lot of things that you got to consider here. Next up is Dragon Link. A lot of people are going to feel that this is very high on the list. I do kind of agree with you, but Dragon Link, unless Nibiru shows back up into the format, Bysteals are pretty good. This is one of the decks that actually gets access to the Bysteals. It has a lot of good control aspects going about it. And I think a lot of people are probably going to underestimate this deck. Again, one good Dragon Link player can turn this entire statistic on its head. And I'm very curious as we kind of go forward here if this is going to be something that's going to stick around. I think for the most part here that Dragon Link is in one of the more unique situations where, the deck already was evolving at a hyper quick rate last format, besides getting bullied a lot of the time out here. But the deck did find niche interactions to step into, and that really did put it in the spotlight in certain aspects. So I think that you do need to be aware of what's going on with Dragon Link for sure. Next up is Sprite. Yay! Honestly, Sprite, when I was first building this, looked like it might have been the best deck in the format. Sprite's pure domination aspects, especially, when you're looking at the Evil Twin Sprite Runick deck, that deck is kind of insane right now, especially when you start doing the Evil Twin interruptions based on the draw power, and then, the little Sprite package just bridges everything together. It is actually a very, very scary deck. And you've also got Pure Sprite out here as well. I mean, that build did not lose anything whatsoever. Pure Sprite is still doing its thing. And obviously, the more of the variations and things that we do continue to see out here, at least continue to do well, I think are going to be something that you need to be aware of. So yeah, Sprite, definitely one of the top contenders out here in the format. So just to be a little bit aware of that. Now, I have a couple of honorable mentions here. I have Purely as honorable mention number 1. I'm strictly just not sure where to put Purely at this point. I want to see some more testing kind of unfold for the format, but if you are going into this format and you are literally not aware of Purely's, how the deck works, you're going to lose. Like, that's how that is. As soon as Yu-Gi-Oh! Players start doing the ignorance control, well, congratulations, they're going to lose. So I had the deck at kind of like number 11, so we're kind of tossing it in here because I'm unsure as of this point. And then we also have Rika here as another honorable mention. I think that Rika, little plant control, is something else. It's in the exact same categories purely. The minute you underestimate Rika Sun Avalon, you just lose. All right, so you definitely got to consider the fact that, you know, the deck being a very strong rogue contender is very, very impressive. And both of these decks make very strong boards, and they actually destroy a lot of the competition if they're not really prepared. And then we have the Kashtira expectancy up here as number one. Now, the only reason why I'm putting this at number one is so much of the community has been like, Robbie, Kashtira is still the best deck. Truthfully, I don't think so. I think what's going to get Kashtira above the curve in certain aspects, though, will be what Kashtira can find itself merging with. Now, the regular pure variant is still good. It's still a top contender. It's a lot more fragile than it ever was. But I think that there's something to be said in this format about, you know, now that we've stripped off a lot of things, you know, maybe merging it with tier elements. You know, what other engines can we look at to Kashtira here to, you know, to patch this up and give this deck a little bit more oomph at the end of the day? And I think that that's really something that you're going to need to consider here is when you start to see a deck like this, looking at other options, it might be scary. So what do you guys think? Please leave a comment down below. Well, Robbie, my deck didn't get mentioned. Don't worry. There's more of these to come. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.